Okay, it's 12 now. So I think we're going to get started. The first thing I wanted to do is just introduce the other team members that are on this webinar with me, partially for moral support, partially for tech support. So we've got Karen McCreary, the greenhouse vegetable IPM specialist, so the me of vegetables. We've got Cassie Russell. She's in charge of nursery crops and landscape. And then Nicole Berardi, who's our intrepid and fearless, well, maybe not totally fearless because you have to deal with us all day long, but our leader on this project, which is Crop Hub. So the idea today is to keep this like pretty cash and just walk through an example of all the different ways we can use Crop Hub. So I've pre-recorded videos because I did not want to risk doing a demo video and then having the whole thing crash or something go wrong. So we're gonna play those videos, but we also want you to walk along with us. So maybe Nicole in the chat, if you can put in the link to Crop Hub, the main page, and I'll start sharing on my screen. So can everyone see this okay? And I'm just waiting for this bar to get out of the way. Are we looking good, guys? Somebody unmute and tell me.
Yep.
Okay. That gray bar might still be there for another minute. All right. Just a bit about Crop Protection Hub to start off. The reason we designed it is we really wanted it to be a one-stop shop for crop protection for people. I know some people were sort of using, different online tools like the BioBest and Copert compatibility databases, maybe some stuff from plant products, and trying to like mix it all together to use their IPM program. So the idea was we wanted to put all the stuff in one place. So we've got phytotoxicity warnings, we've got the rates and application information for registered insecticides, fungicides, and herbicides. We've got up-to-date information on product efficacy, and as well as compatibility information with natural enemies that we use in greenhouse crops. You can also do product comparisons for specific pests, and you also have the ability to look at application information, the ability to sort by application type, which I know can be helpful for a lot of growers. So this webinar is going to target spring crops a little bit, considering I know we're getting poinsettias. They should all be out of the greenhouse now. And the next thing on your mind is an ornamental grower is your spring crop. So Crop Hub can help you with this by helping you look up things like cutting dips that you might want to do on spring crops, one and done pesticide applications. So finding pesticides for something like broadmite that has good efficacy rating. Like this is an example of a spring plan from a grower I work with that has all the different crops that he grows and which ones are going to get pesticide applications versus which ones are getting bios. So those ones that get bios, we also might want compatibility information for those biocontrol agents we're using on those particular crops. And it will also help you look up chemicals if you need to have an emergency plan, which happens to the best of us, either some sort of outbreak or fly-in that you might get into your greenhouse. So I'm going to break this kind of into two parts. The first part is just going to be, I'm calling it keep it simple, stupid, just walking through like the real basics of Crop Hub, and then getting into the more complicated things like different ways of viewing data and things like natural enemy compatibility and stuff like that. So this webinar, again, is geared more towards ornamentals. There is going to be some similarities with the greenhouse vegetable module, which is online already, but I will just say that only the insecticides are up to date, and I believe Kara is still working on the fungicides. She can answer more to that later. And this is also relevant to nursery crop growers who do some propagation in the greenhouse or might also do other greenhouse crops as well. The nursery crop module probably won't be done until maybe late 2025, but that is coming. So the idea today is that you guys hopefully will follow along. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that. If you want to try on a different device, Crop Hub also does work on your phone or a tablet. So you can take a picture of this QR code, or if you've got a second screen or what have you, you can go to this website, or you can literally just Google Crop Protection Hub and it should pop right up. So the first scenario we're going to walk through in the next couple of videos is finding products for a specific pest. So we're just going to look up one pest. But the very first step in Crop Hub is to find your crop group, like go into the appropriate module and then find your crop group. And this is important because the rates obviously depend on the crop type you're putting stuff on. So we're going to do an example with potted plants, and then we're going to go to propagation material. Okay, so the very first thing we're going to do once we get to the Crop Protection Hub is we're going to scroll down and find your crop. So in this case, it would be greenhouse ornamentals. Then if we select our crop group, that'll narrow down the products by their registered use patterns. So obviously products registered for cut flowers versus those used for dips or for particular mist applications and propagation are different than those used on potted plants. So if you want to see the most products that are registered for greenhouse use, we would click into potted plants, and that's what we're going to use for our examples today. Okay, so hopefully everyone was able to follow along with that. And so you should be in potted plants now. And just a little note for that, sometimes there are, with certain like fungicides and stuff, they'll have instructions for narrower crop groups, things like bedding plants and foliage plants. I used to have those sections in here, but I took them out because it was just too confusing and too repetitive. But those now will be either in warnings, or if you go to the rate, it'll say different rates for different crop types. So then we're just going to go into an example for propagation, but I am going to. So if you've already chosen potted plants or cut flowers and want to go back and choose a different crop group, for example, looking at propagation material, you can go over here to the crop group and press the edit icon. And that will take you back to this original screen where you can select the crop group. So let's put in propagative material instead. And then notice on the previous page, there was 98 products available for use on potted plants. This one, however, for dips or cutting mists, only has 8 products available. And the pest list will also be shorter here. There's only 16 pests you can search from that are on label for any sort of cutting, dips, or mists. Whereas there's a much bigger list of products under both cut flowers and potted plants. Yeah, so the other reason you want to make sure, oh, good, just picture myself. The other reason you want to make sure that you're going into the propagation section, and that's why I pulled it out as a different section, is the dip rates are always usually much lower than the label rates. So that's why you want to check there. The dip rates won't show up under, potted plants or cut flowers. So that's important to know. All right, so in our scenario of finding products for a specific pest, we're going to use aphids as an example because they're actually pretty simple. Most aphids respond the same to chemicals, regardless if it's like green peach or foxglove aphid. So go back into your potted plant section. So you should be in propagation now. Use that little gray arrow or pencil icon and go back and reselect potted crops for this example. So our first scenario was looking up different products for a specific pest. So you'll notice here on the right a bunch of search or drop-down menus. We can select pests, we can select application method, or we can even select specific products to compare. So we're going to start off here with just selecting pests. So you can either click on this and then scroll through the list, and it does diseases first and then insects. or we can even just type the word we're looking for and it'll give you options. So we're going to click on aphids. Now we've selected all the products for aphids, and you'll notice the Okay, so again, the reason I chose aphids is because they all react pretty similarly to chemicals. Other pest groups, we know whitefly, obviously greenhouse whitefly and Bemisia whitefly respond really differently. And thrips are like that too, right? So we do have the thrips broken into a bunch of different species: western flower thrips, thrips parvispinus, onion thrips, echinothrips. I haven't added more of the weirdos in there like greenhouse banded thrips yet. But as we get more information on what works on those are definitely something we could add in. So just to note that because of that variation, it is really important that you ID some of your pests down to species in groups like thrips and whitefly before you use this, because the efficacy ratings will be different. Okay, so still in our scenario of finding the appropriate pesticide for a single pest, we're going to look at sorting options. And which sorting option you choose really depends on your priorities. So there's a bunch of different options. There's natural enemy compatibility, product trade name. You can sort by the active ingredient or the IRAC or FRAC group. And this will walk you through the two I like best. So we're going to click on aphids. Now we've selected all the products for aphids. And you'll notice the default sorting is beneficial compatibility. So compatibility with natural enemies we would use in the greenhouse. And the rankings are based on the total average of their compatibility across all the bios used in the greenhouse. You can get more information on specific bios, and I'll show you this in a minute. But for now, we're just going to concentrate on, okay, they're sorted by soft to hard. The ones where we haven't input information yet, or we might just not know anything about, like Rycar is a pretty new insecticide. Also, it's fairly new as a Canadian registration. So either there isn't information or I haven't entered it yet. I'm unsure right now which of those that is. I'll get to that. So just going back up here as an example, Ference, Belief, and Velifer, a type of Bavaria, are all pretty soft. So if that's how you wanted to choose your aphid control products, that is an option. I personally like to sort by product trade name in case I have a specific product in mind. And then that lets you see them alphabetically by trade name. Okay, so I just want to go back to the beginning of this video for a second and pause it. The other thing I wanted to show you is you can toggle your beneficial compatibility ratings by insects or mites. And the reason we included that is because some growers really rely on a mite-based bio program for thrips, but they might not have much else going on in their greenhouse. So as I mentioned before, these compatibility ratings are an average of, how soft is this chemical generally against all the bios, or how hard is it generally on all the bios. So obviously that's going to change on whether it's more of a miticide or more of an insecticide. So these overall ratings on the front of these baseball cards, as I like to call it, will change if you toggle mites or insects. So that can be a useful tool if you're just controlling thrips in your greenhouse with bios. Okay, so now one of the more exciting things is being able to compare product efficacies. And there's two ways to do this, sort of like a quick and dirty way, and then a way that gives you more details. So we're going to go through that as an example. We're going to use root rots as an example because I also wanted to throw some fungicide stuff into this webinar. So to get rid of aphids as the pest you've selected already, you can either go, there's a reset button at the bottom of where those 3 drop-down menus are, or where you see aphids listed in the little box as the pest you've selected, you can X that out. So those are both ways to sort of reset the whole thing. So we just want to leave it blank for now, and then we're going to pick a new thing. Okay, so we've already learned how to pick our crop group and put in different pests. So now we're going to look at efficacy. So you'll want to be typing in or searching for Rhizoctonia root rot at this point. So in this main view of Crop Hub we're in grid view, you can see what I like to call little baseball cards. And the baseball cards have tons of information. They have the trade name, the active ingredient, the REI, the FRAC or IRAC group that the product is in. And they also have these buttons down here that are going to be sort of the meat and potatoes of CropHub. So the first of these is the efficacy breakdown. And this gives you a quick snapshot of the efficacy rating of the product. So we've got a rating from 0 to 4 stars. 0 would imply that there's either no control or we've got resistance, and 4 would obviously be the very best. If it's indicated as a 1, it's provided with fair control, which would be something like suppression. And then the 2s and 3s are getting into actual control, and 4 would be obviously excellent control. So you can click on the different products and compare them this way. So these both have very similar ratings. For Rhizoctonia root rot, same with Heritage and Medallion. But what you should always do is not just take these at face value. We're going to go into what's into this details section later. But if you click into this details section, it might give you other thoughts or other points of consideration that you should think of besides efficacy. Obviously, one of these is going to be phytotoxicity. Depending on the crop you grow, this might not be the appropriate product for you, even if it's really great on Rhizoctonia root rot. And if you scroll into the pest efficacy section, it'll also give you references for where I got that information from, as well as any further information. So some of these efficacy ratings might say, oh, works best if used preventatively, or works best earlier in the crop. And if those are true and that's not where you are in your production cycle, then this may not be the product for you. So always make sure to click in and see if there's more details relating to efficacy, explaining anything like resistance or when and how to use it best, other than just taking that quick reference on the front of the baseball card as gospel. To pick our crop, sorry. The other thing I just wanted to point out, if I can find it real quick, just scrolling through the video. Okay, so just pausing here. This legend might be different for different crops. So a lot of people pick the same legend, but for the ornamental one, I wanted it to follow, especially for the fungicides, some of the information that was already out there with efficacy ratings. So I based this efficacy rating on Ann Chase, who's a pretty famous plant pathologist for ornamentals in the US. She's got a bunch of really great stuff out there. So this is her rating scale. And so you might notice greenhouse vegetables, the scale might be different. So make sure to always check the key instead of just looking at the number of stars, because it can have different meanings depending on different crops. Okay, so step 5 in looking up a product for a specific pest. Now we're into the nitty-gritty part. This is where we actually look up the important things. So let's go back to our aphid example. So again, X out of aphids or reset your thing for, I think it should say Rhizoctonia right now, and you want to go back in and put aphids in as a pest. Okay, so now we're really going to get into the meat and potatoes of CropHub, like I said. So we've already got aphids as our example pest put in. We've got our 23 products that are registered or efficacious on aphids. And then what we want to do is pick a product. Let's just use Belief to make this easy. We already know how to look at the efficacy breakdown on the front of the baseball card. And here we've got an example comparison of how efficacy might differ slightly, but based on how you apply it, either as a spray or a drench. But most of the real good information is here in View Details. So the first thing that's going to pop up when you click on View Details is a phytotoxicity warning or any kind of warning about the product. Maybe it's going to be if it's going to be deregistered or a use pattern is changing. That's also something I would put in the warning. So here we've got some phytotoxicity information. Some of this is from the label. It may also be from information I've learned from growers using the product or from other colleagues in the States or eGrow alerts or things like that. In the product attributes section, It repeats some of the information about the IRAC group and the active ingredient, and you can also click on this to get to the legal label. And a reminder that the label is the legal document. Although we are summarizing this information on CropHub, it's always good to double check things on the legal label. And then we go into rate information. So for this product, because it's got a foliar and a drench application, we've got the rates listed for both. And whenever it's possible, I've tried to convert the label rate into something that's the most meaningful for greenhouse ornamental growers, which is 100 liters of water. And that's because spray tanks, I think most of them can hold up to 300 or 400 liters of water. So you can easily multiply this up. Or if you're using a backpack sprayer, you can cut this in half or in quarters to do a volume of a backpack sprayer. So that's why I chose that 100 liters of water. And if a drench rate has an amount of AI per hectare, I've tried to translate into something that's more applicable to the greenhouse as well. But it's still just a conversion. It still follows the legal rate on the label. So any notes to do with application or anything that improves efficacy, you would potentially find in here, or under the warning, there's another spot for application notes or just general information that we might want people to know about a product. I can show you that one in a second. And you can scroll down into more details on pest efficacy ratings, as I mentioned before. So for example, here we have a note about oleander. Aphid seems way less susceptible to bleed. We're also experiencing some resistance developing in different populations of aphids with this product. So that information will be recorded here. Next, we've got the re-entry interval, as well as the cumulative amount of, or maximum number of applications allowed per crop cycle is usually how many, or how the labels list it. And any notes relating to that, if, you know, there's anything to do with how many foliar applications versus drench applications are allowed. Okay, so that was our one example. When I talked about application details might be under the phytotoxicity warning. If anyone's curious, you can click into Contos, I think is a good example, where it's got a little blurb under the phytotoxicity stuff talking about, okay, this product works best with an adjuvant. Here's the adjuvants they recommend. So that would be a good example of that. I forgot to actually include it later in the webinar because there's a lot going on with CropHub. There's a lot of different moving parts, which is great because it means it's a really powerful tool. But obviously it can get a little confusing. So at this point, if you have any questions or if I'm going too fast, if you want to put that in the chat, and then maybe Cassie or Kara can come on and let me know what some of those questions are. Or if you generally feel comfortable, let me know and we can move on into some sort of more complex views or looking at multiple pests at once. Okay, I'm not hearing from my little cheerleading team, so I'm going to assume that means we're all good.
We are all good, Sarah.
I think you're good. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So we've gone through the simple parts. Now we're going to get into the more complicated stuff, but I think it's some of the more exciting stuff. So our first scenario was looking for a product for a specific pest. Now we're going to go into different scenarios. So this is an example of if you may have a restriction in your greenhouse. And we're going to use aphids again as an example. So if you've already got that up, just keep aphids in there. Okay, so the next scenario we're going to walk through is if you need a specific application type. I know with a lot of the new builds of greenhouses with flood floors, drenching isn't always an option. So growers are looking for more products that can be applied foliarly. So down the right-hand side, again, in these drop-down menus or search boxes, you can go to application method. And so the options we have for greenhouse products are drench, foliar, granular broadcast. So if the product's a granular and they recommend, putting it on the top of the soil. We have soil in here, which is actually means soil media mixes. It's probably named soil just so that it matches some of the outdoor field crop application types. So anyway, if you see soil, that's what that means. It doesn't mean to apply directly to bare soil. This is definitely incorporated into the media. And then LVM or fogger situations. Just a note there that not very many products have LVM or foggers directly on the label. So we are not including it if it's not on the label, even if it's sort of like they don't specify that you can't do it. We're sticking to the legal label there. So not a lot of products in that category. So if we are wanting to focus on foliar products, we can do that just by picking that. And you'll see we had started out with 96 products available, and now it's gone down to 83. And this is all the possible products, fungicides and insecticides. So again, we can select a pest. Let's just use aphids as our example again by typing in aphids. And you can see we've got a list of all the products that can be applied foliarly. And again, I just want to reiterate, cutting dips isn't going to show up here under the application method because I thought it was more important to chunk that out separately since there's often, other restrictions and what have you. So it was easier to have it as a separate crop group. All right, so we're moving on to a new scenario, and this is one where you can more directly compare products. And we're going to use root rots as an example. So if you want to X out your aphids, and we'll probably be typing in something else. This would be a scenario where you already have in mind, like the pest and the products that you might want to use, and you're just interested in doing like a super quick comparison without having to search the list. So we could do something like fusarium. You could type into the pest list fusarium and pick wilt or root rot and get all the 13 products registered for fusarium and go through and compare their efficacies that way. But if you're like, okay, I have Senator and Palladium and Medallion in my cupboard, what if I just want to look at those? So you can go down here to this search box, which is select products to compare. We'll just ignore the 3 products I mentioned actually happen to be in a row already. Pretend they're not. So we can pick from this list or start typing in Senator. It's chosen that. Then you can put in Medallion, choose that, and then put in Palladium. And then over here, it says only show the 3 products selected for comparison. So if you click that box, only the 3 products are there now, excuse me. And there's nothing else. So you've just got those to compare. So that makes it real quick and easy to look at the efficacy for each one. And these efficacy cards will stay up. All right, so that's that example. I also just wanted to point out, I didn't put this in the video, but a sort of quicker way to do this, if you don't have a particular thing in mind, but as you're scrolling through the efficacies and you're like, oh, I want this one and this one and this one, you can click that select to compare button on the bottom, and then it'll turn green to show it selected, but you still have to go back up to that little checkbox up at the top to actually get rid of the other products and just have these left for comparison. So now I think this is one of the most interesting scenarios we can use CropHub for, and that's when we want to look for products that can control multiple pests simultaneously. And there's lots of reasons you would want to do this in ornamentals, mostly to reduce overall costs, so saving money by saving product, labor for spraying, and reduce your total REIs instead of spraying 2 products, on 2 different days. If you can find a product that will hit 2 pests at the same time and just have 1 REI, that's great. And also for resistance management purposes, because it helps preserve active ingredients, or at least if you get knocked down with 1 chemical against 2 pests, then you can sort of wait and see how efficacious that was before you go in with another product. And the reason we think this is important to include is because pests don't exist in a vacuum in ornamentals or any other crop really, but we do get large pest complexes in different crops in ornamentals, especially the ones that are in the greenhouse for a long time, it seems like, things like cut flowers or tropical plants or even poinsettias. So let's use Crop Protection Hub to find control options for multiple different pests. So if you've got, I think Fusarium is the example right now, X that out. And we're also, if you've picked any sort of products to compare, hit the reset button, and we're going to start this fresh in potted crops. So one of the biggest strengths of Crop Hub is the ability to compare products for multiple pests at once. And like I mentioned in the slide before, this can be really useful for crops that get a whole complex of pests, say something like gerbera or tropical plants. We'll use that as an example right now and show you what it can do. So let's say gerbera or a tropical plant, we get pests such as aphids. Sometimes that can be oleander aphid or a green peach aphid. So we'll select that. We'll put in greenhouse whitefly and spider mites for good measure, if I can spell spider mite. So now we have 39 products from which we can compare that will have at least one of these pests on the label. And again, they'll be sorted by the products that have the most pests on the label. So the match selected pests, then by chemical group, then by active ingredient, then by trade name. So if we want to pick products in our IPM program, if we're going on mostly a chemical program and avoiding some of the softer things, we could pick Contos to compare to other products. So you can look at the efficacy ratings. It's pretty good for aphids and whitefly and also for spider mites, so that's great. And again, if we're picking more traditional chemistries, we can go down here and pick Magister, for example, that has both greenhouse whitefly and 2-spotted spider mite on the label. Again, pretty effective for both. So we'll select that to compare. And let's add a third one in here just for fun. Let's pick Rycar, since it's fairly effective against both aphids and whitefly. So we'll pick that. So again, we can click this box to show only the 3 products for comparison. So we've got our 3 products. Again, we can compare efficacies across the board and see what pests they cover. And then what can be really helpful in planning an IPM program and passing that information along to other people in your greenhouse, such as junior growers or the person actually doing the pesticide applications, is you can switch from grid view to list view. And this will give you the most important information about each product in a little snapshot. But there's more information than there would be if you, say, printed the page that's grid view that has the baseball cards on it. The list view actually has the pest, the rate, the REI, and the control, and any product rate caveats that may be on the product. So it gives us our 3 products for aphids, or our 2 products, pardon me, for aphids. Then it'll give the products and the rate specific to greenhouse whitefly, and then as well for 2-spotted spider mite. So if you're trying to target one or several pests with one application, you would definitely want to use the rate that covers both those pests. So then what you can do is, okay, you've got your little program for your gerbera crop that's going to cover these main pests. You can go up here to print view and actually print this as a PDF to put in a binder. And if you want this to fit on pages a little nicer, you can go down here to more settings and change the scale. We often recommend you change it to 60 or 70%, and you'll save a lot of paper this way because you'll get more of the product details fitting on the page. Okay, so that was an example of finding products for multiple pests. I just want to make a note about multiple pests and efficacy ratings. So you may have noticed in this example that when Magister popped up, greenhouse whitefly, although it showed up, had a little asterisk. And the asterisk indicates this pest is not actually on the label. So if you actually look at the Magister label, it has Bemisia whitefly on the label, not greenhouse whitefly, but we do know it has efficacy against greenhouse whitefly as well. So the rankings will show all the pests the product has efficacy on, and the purpose of this is to aid in resistance management. So if you're trying to control multiple pests with just one product to conserve active ingredients. So this is for controlling simultaneous pests only though, and one of these pests obviously has to be on the legal label. And just as a reminder again, the label is the legal document. And if you're targeting a single pest, for example, like thrips parvis finus, always make sure the pest is on the legal label in that case. So what you would have to do there is when you're going through your efficacy ratings, make sure that the pest you want to target does not have an asterisk next to it. And then you can actually filter those products by hitting those compare buttons on the bottom, and then you'll get an assortment of products where that pest is on the legal label. So I just wanted to reiterate that. It's not, I didn't want to bring that up earlier in the webinar because it's a bit confusing, but now that you know how to use the compare button and you know what that asterisk means, it should be fairly easy to make sure that you're always on label. So I'm going to give you now an example of comparing products for multiple pests using a bit of a different view than we talked about before to again show you how powerful CropHub is. There's also another way that CropHub can help you plan your spring IPM program by taking a more zoomed out view on the products you might want to use for your spring pests. So let's be kind of crazy and put all our potential spring crop pests in at once. So let's put in broad mite. Calibrachoa often get aphids. We might get western flower thrips. We'll pepper in some onion thrips there for good measure, and maybe also some spider mites. And if we really want to complicate things, let's assume we're going to get some greenhouse whitefly in on Gerbera or something like that. So that's a lot of different pests, and it would take a lot of time to scroll through these products individually and look at their efficacy breakdown for those pests and decide how to use them in the program. So the better way is to click on this efficacy view, and you'll get charts of all the pests with the products. And currently it's broken down by application method as well as activity of the pest. So these are two products where you can apply as a drench, but they also have a systemic activity being taken up by the plant. We are going to simplify this in the future by just keeping application method and getting rid of the activity, since it sort of chunks things up a lot. But anyway, if we scroll down here to something like products that have contact activity, but you can apply foliarly, this gives you a little better snapshot of the efficacy ratings across all the pests. So you can see something like Sphere T would help you with greenhouse whitefly and 2-spotted spider mite, for example, and has pretty good ratings on both. For western flower thrips, you can see that Botanigard WP works really well, but it doesn't really work that well on onion thrips, and that's work done by the Van Land Research and Innovation Center. But they've also discovered that Botanigard ES works really well on both onion thrips and western flower thrips. So you may want to consider switching to that. And then you can keep scrolling down to find products with other activity profiles that may be attractive. So with contact products, often you have to get right on the underside of leaves. Maybe you want to do something with more translaminar effects, so you can just make sure you hit the top sides of leaves. And that might be something like Avid that's highly effective for a bunch of different pests, or Pylon, or even something like Forbid. So that's a quick way to plan your program. And then you can always go back in this view and then select particular products to compare that you were interested in. And again, narrow this down and then print them off for whoever is doing the pesticide applications or is in charge of that particular crop or zone. And then I just wanted to scroll this back for a second and see if we can do that. So yeah, so here's an example where you can see that the asterisks I was telling you about before, indicating whether or not something's on label or not, also shows up in this efficacy view. So it's easy to keep track of that way as well. Okay, I have just like a few more scenarios to walk through. We've gotten through the main parts. These are just like the extra value added things that make Crop Hub really great. And one of the things Kara and I really fought for was a full compatibility section that goes into more detail than those compatibility ratings on the front of the cards. So this is what you would use if you actually want to check products against the individual pests that you're going to use, or the individual bios you're going to use in your IPM program. And just a note, when there's no information, if it's blank, that does not mean the product is safe to use against that organism. So I believe this example is Contos. If you want to click into Contos just to follow along, but you could really click into any insecticide and scroll down. There's less information on the fungicide. So if you want to take a look at this live with me right now, just definitely pick an insecticide. We gonna again. Interesting. 1 second, guys. Cannot play media. Oh no, I'm not sure why this is happening on this one. Anyway, I will just verbally talk about this one then. It's too bad. So we use the same rating scales that are commonly in the BioBest and Copert databases. So 1 to 4, so you'll recognize that 1 is good, 4 is bad. We've chunked this into spray versus drench, since we know that drench tends to be softer. And then when you click into this, you can see activity on the whole population, larvae, adults, as well as persistence of the product. And we've taken this information and amalgamated it from different sources. So if Copert versus BioBest, for example, if they give you different ratings, we'll always pick the more conservative one, because we want to err on the side of caution that this might actually hurt your biocontrol program. So if like Copert gives something a 4 and BioBest gives it a 2, we would have given it a 4 in this case. And we're working with other organizations to add more compatibility data to hopefully flesh this out. So this exists at the bottom of pretty much every product. If it's not there, it's because we don't have any information. And if you do scroll through an example right now, you'll see that a lot of it is blank. And that just is because there are a lot of gaps in the literature when it comes to compatibility rating. But the information we do have will be here. So another scenario is looking up a specific product, and that might be to see if it's registered on multiple crops. We all know greenhouse growers that do ornamentals, but some do fruit crops as well, or greenhouse transplants for spring. So let's go into an example. This example will bring up some nursery crop information, but I just wanted to let you guys know that this is just currently placeholder information, and that we'll be sort of rejiggering the nursery crop stuff, and it'll look different going forward. So I have a note about dragging this. I can't play this one either. Nerds, I don't know what's going on. All right, let's skip this example for now. Or I wonder if I stop sharing and then resharing, if we can make this happen. Sorry, guys. Technical difficulties. Interesting. See if we can play it like this. All right, we can play it like this. Sorry for the smaller view, but we're gonna work with the technical difficulties. So if you go to the hub, back to the landing page, so this is the first page you entered on, you can scroll by all these other crop groups. So normally we go into greenhouse ornamentals, and you can skip to actual specific products, whether that's all products together, herbicides, insecticides, you got it. So an example might be you grow ornamentals, but you also want to know if a product can be used on greenhouse transplants that maybe you're doing for your spring bedding crop this year. So say you want to use Contos for aphids and want to know what else it's registered on. Instead of going through the greenhouse vegetable module, you can just go here, find Contos, and then go to the actual product specifications page, and it'll tell you what registrations it has. So you can see our greenhouse ornamentals are first, greenhouse cut flowers, greenhouse potted plants, excellent. And then you see it, yes, it is under greenhouse vegetables crop protection with all of these products, and also on some outdoor nursery stuff. So that's one use for this product specification page. Also, if you've heard of a product for field crops and you're wondering if it's registered in greenhouses, that's another use for this. So a recent example is the fungicide Property for powdery mildew. It just got a minor use label expansion for greenhouse ornamentals. But if you weren't sure about that and heard great things about it, you could go to the Property fungicide specifications and look to see what crops it's registered on. It's registered on a lot of outdoor stuff, but you can see that it's now registered for greenhouse ornamental protection, as well as probably some greenhouse vegetable stuff that will be added in here shortly. So that's another use of, or another pathway you can get to looking at specific products. And again, you can sort of find them all through this reference tab at the top. Okay, and let's see if this lets me go back to my presentation. Yes, so another little feature I wanted to show you was these links that are both on the home page of the ornamentals crop protection, as well as they'll stay on the side of the menu the whole time. So these are any important links we feel like will help you with your pesticide program. So the On Floriculture homepage, specific blog posts that I've done. So I have a tab on the On Floriculture a blog about information on Japanese beetle regulations. So that explains more like when you need to spray and what products you should pick, because otherwise if you just search for Japanese beetle in here, you'll get the products that have Japanese beetle on the label, but it won't really tell you about how using those products meets like the GCP requirements. So it's important to click on that. Also, cutting dips, it'll give you more information on phytotoxicity concerns or when you should be using it or things like that. So as we go, I'll be adding things that are important. And I'm just going to quickly go back and see if it's going to let me play that compatibility video. Because Kara and I fought really hard to have this in. So I think Kara might cry if I don't play this video. And then if we want to look at beneficial compatibility ratings, they're at the bottom of this details section. This scale from 1 to 4 is the scale that you'll be familiar with from the BioBest and Copert online databases that are now available as apps. So we've combined this all into one, and we've given it by both spray and drench. Oops. And so we'll just click into spray for a second, and you'll see we've given the compatibility ratings by population on adults and larvae specifically, and as well as the persistence if it's known. So I won't go through the whole thing since I've already kind of outlined it, but I just wanted you to see what that would look like. So Okay, and that's basically it. You are now an expert on Crop Hub and can plan your spring IPM program. So I am going to open it up to questions in the Q&A or the chat from you guys. First, though, I just want to acknowledge all the people that have put their time and effort into this. Our project leads, originally Madej Quay, and then now Nicole, have been coming partway through this project and take us all to the end. And all my poor summer students that had to toil over this, first as a spreadsheet, and then actually it being in the hub and making sure the hub matched the spreadsheet and deleting stuff and fixing how we wanted it presented and all that. I'm sure the next summer student will still be working on this. And then I also have questions for you guys. Some of this is captured in a survey that'll start when the webinar ends. And I'm really hoping you guys can answer that for me, because I want to know other things that you might think would be helpful to have in Crop Hub. I am sort of limited by like how much work it is to repeat the same pesticides over and over for different categories. Like I said, that's why I got rid of bedding crops and foliage crops, because it was just sort of like the same chemicals -1, but when you have to go in and edit it at the back end, it's a lot of editing. But if growers do see a lot of value in putting in particular key crops that might have only a few pests, but that are important, things like poinsettias or tropicals or even chrysanthemums, I would definitely consider that, or things like outdoor potted flowering plants like garden mums we do every year, or even just other products like sanitation products or herbicides. Looks like we're good. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their time and joining me in this little experiment today of trying to show you guys how to do it with videos and the technical difficulties I knew would happen, and of course they did. Thank you to all my co-hosts, and just a reminder, when this ends, a survey should pop up. So if you can fill out that exit survey of just, how effective you found this, and also anything that you want to add on to Crop Hub in the future. So I've got a record of that. That would be amazing. I appreciate every single one of you that came today, every single one of the growers that have had huge input on this. There's been a lot of you that I've worked with closely that have given me tips on how to present stuff. And hopefully it'll just keep getting better and better in the future. And thank you all very much.